Hola, it's Rachel from Wait Que, your Spanglish podcast de confianza. When we started this podcast, I had no idea how much work went into it. Recording, editing, designing logos, managing socials. Each day brought a new challenge. Starting something from scratch is exciting, pero it can also be very overwhelming. That's why I wish I had something like Shopify back then. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and it's also perfect for anyone getting started. Build your online store with Shopify's professional templates, and let their AI tools help write descriptions, polish photos, and generate headlines. Shopify's got your back with inventory, shipping, returns, and all the not-so-glamorous parts of running a business. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your site. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/sonoro. Go to shopify.com/sonoro for more information.
Este episodio de More Than Mamis es presentado por los nuevos McCrispy Strips de McDonald's.
Y no estamos hablando de cualquier pollo. Estos strips son crujientes, jugosos y tienen ese toquecito de pimienta que los hace irresistibles.
Y lo mejor es que viene con su propia salsa, la nueva Creamy Chili McCrispy Strip Dip.
Una cremita sazonada con ese balance justo entre dulce y picante. Literal, está hecha para el dipping.
Pero bueno, aquí viene la gran pregunta. ¿Hasta cuántas veces se puede hacer dipping antes de que te juzguen? ¿Una vez, doble, triple?
Cuádruple, depende si estás en confianza. Yo digo que no hay límite, especialmente si tienes a la mano salsas como la barbecue, honey mustard, la sweet and sour de McDonald's o incluso la mezcla que no falla, la mayo ketchup.
Bueno, en mi casa la llamamos salsa rosada, pero es una de mis favoritas. Yo soy team de mezclar cualquier salsa, la que más nos guste, pero sí quiero probar esta, la nueva Creamy Chili.
Así es, pruébelo y después nos cuentan los nuevos McCrispy Strips más la Creamy Chili McCrispy Strip Dip, pollo hecho para el dipping, solo en McDonald's.
Para pa pa pa.
I turned around and saw a woman walking towards us. She wore a black sweater that was too big for her and a very long skirt, so long that I couldn't see her feet. But she walked as if she were dragging them one by one, as if she couldn't lift them. Welcome to this night of horror stories. One of those nights especially dedicated to those who work behind the wheel, and to those who listen to us while driving, and to those who will soon have to take a trip. You can accompany yourselves with these tales, or perhaps save them for later. The possibility is small, but it always exists. That something might listen, that something might feed on fear and come closer, that you might be the next protagonist of tales of the night. My wife's ex-husband lives in Pachuca. On one occasion, he called us in the early morning hours. His daughter, Mari Fair, had had a serious issue related to her mental health, a very ugly crisis. Things that aren't for me to say. But she was in the hospital. It was the middle of the pandemic. People were going through difficult times. My husband loves her as if she were his own daughter. He lived with her for 10 years. So at that moment, he asked me if we could go see how he could help. We left Mexico City at around 1 a.m. I don't like driving at those hours, but in emergencies one does what one has to do. The highway to Pachuca was more deserted than usual. Even at those hours there's usually movement. But that night it wouldn't be. Maybe because of the bad weather, because of the rain. But it seemed like everyone had decided it was better not to go out that night. For me, it was better. I drove at a moderate speed because of the weather conditions, and also because minutes before I had been asleep, and not even the strong coffee I had with me had managed to wake me up completely. Suddenly, out of nowhere from the heavy rain, we clearly saw how something came running towards us. It crossed the highway diagonally at full speed. A child. A small child. I almost went off the road with the sudden turn of the wheel. And of course, the first thing we did was pull over, put on the hazard lights, and get out to look for the child. My wife and I. There was nothing. Not a single sign of the child or anything else. We also couldn't see any place where he could have come from, or where he could have gone to take shelter. Literally, it was an apparition. Something that briefly appeared before us. And just as it appeared, it disappeared. We called the police, but they didn't pay much attention to us. And after 20 minutes of searching for him, we decided to give up and continue on our way because of the time and the urgency we were carrying, and because of the following days in Pachuca, which were very sad and emotionally heavy. I think to a certain extent we forgot what we experienced on the way. But weeks later, when I remembered it, I wanted to search for the place, the point where it had happened. See it on Google Maps to try to understand where that child could have come from. But I found something worse. The first thing I saw was a news story from that area about an accident just a few months before. A bus crash where many people died. Now I don't know if what I saw was a wandering soul or simply a ghost, an echo of that terrible moment. Very good evening to the best community in the world, as Uriel says. I want to tell you something that only the people who lived it, some members of my family, and my best friend know until now. And she was the one who convinced me to share it here. The story is about people who dedicate themselves to the road, as all the men in my family do on my mother's side, and they in many things are like the men of before. Not in their treatment of women, thank God, but in never opening up, not sharing anything, not talking about what happens to them, and even less if there are things that cause them fear. On the highways, we've been learning. Things have happened to them that we wouldn't even imagine, but they accept them as things that happen. Just like that, literally. They've never worried about understanding them. It's not about believing or not in the strange, but about knowing that when you live on the road, when you spend half your life on the highway, there are things that end up reaching you even if you don't want to know about them. My uncle Beto had been driving long-distance buses for more than 20 years. He had seen everything. People who appeared on the side of the highway in places, and at times where there shouldn't be anyone. Figures crossing in the early morning when there wasn't even a town or settlement nearby. Lights in the sky, especially balls of fire. The witches, as they say, sometimes appeared in the distance in the mountains and other times seemed to accompany his bus floating in parallel. He saw it all, but he always let it pass. Everything. He said it was better not to pay attention, that when someone drives so much, the sight sometimes sees things that aren't there and the mind ends up filling in the gaps with what it already knows. He said that surely if he thought about it well, most of those things would have an explanation. The thing is, he didn't like to think about it. He wasn't a man who got scared easily. He was serious, quiet, one of those who are always calm no matter what happens. That's why, when he told his story, precisely at a funeral, no one doubted that what he saw wasn't a trick of the sight or a bad dream. He says it happened on a quiet early morning. He was close to arriving at the Durango terminal. The passengers were sleeping. The bus engine was vibrating smoothly. No problem. Recently tuned up, and the road was clear, and that was a gain because he had started that run leaving from a storm in Mexico City. Everything indicated that he would finish the trip without setbacks. But just when he was about to relax, when he was already imagining some burritos for breakfast arriving in Durango, he saw an elderly man walking slowly along the side of the highway. He was hunched over, disoriented, with a lost look. At those hours, there was no reason for someone to be there. There were no toll booths or nearby stops. No wrecked car was visible, nor signs that he was waiting for someone. He simply moved forward, as if he had appeared out of nowhere. My uncle decreased his speed, stopped a few meters from him, and when he was passing beside him, he opened the door to speak to him. "Sir, are you all right?" The man looked up with a confused expression. "Who are you?" he asked with a raspy voice. It wasn't the response he expected. He thought that maybe the man was lost, that he had suffered an accident and didn't remember well what had happened. "I'm a driver, sir," he told him. "I'm going to the Durango terminal. Get in. Do you need help?" The man shook his head, but he kept that lost look, as if he were trying to remember something that didn't quite fit in his mind. Finally, he looked up, and with a calmness that didn't make sense, he said, "Continue carefully, son. Death is near." Then he simply continued on his way, moving forward with slow steps, moving away down the highway in the opposite direction. My uncle kept watching him through the rearview mirror. Was there something about him that seemed familiar? Something in the voice, in the way he moved? For a moment he thought of his grandfather, in the measured way he spoke, in the scoldings disguised as advice he gave him when he was a child. And the look was very similar. The eyes. I think that maybe he was one of those old men who had spent their whole lives on the highway, and who had learned to see what others couldn't. He stayed there for a moment, motionless, watching as the man disappeared in the distance. Then he sighed and continued on his way. But he hadn't advanced even a kilometer when something made him brake suddenly. A horse was standing in the middle of the highway. The animal wasn't moving. It was as if in shock, with agitated breathing and skin covered with liquid. It appeared to be blood. It wasn't the first time my uncle had encountered an animal on the route, but something about this one was different. He got down carefully and approached. That's when he saw the wounds. Small cuts, scrapes on the legs, as if it had come out of a narrow place, from something that had trapped it. And when he pushed it to one side of the highway, when he looked up, he understood it. A few meters away, down the road, in a shallow ravine, a truck was overturned. He approached cautiously. The image was terrible. The car was completely destroyed. There was no way anyone could have come out of there alive. He looked at the horse, trying to understand how it was possible that it had survived if it came from there. Something didn't make sense. He turned on the emergency lights and waited for a highway patrol to arrive. There wasn't much more he could do. When the officers approached, he explained what he had seen and left with that empty stomach feeling that the helplessness of not being able to do anything more leaves you with. He couldn't stop thinking about the man on the highway, the one he saw shortly before arriving there. He couldn't help but wonder what he meant by death. How did he appear just before the accident? Was it a warning? A ghost? It wouldn't be strange. He had heard stories like that before. Or maybe he was simply an old man who had come across that scene, and that was the most feasible? No. But despite that, what he felt for years is that he had seen the driver of that truck, his spirit, understanding where he was now on another plane, trying to move away from the dark figure of death that he warned him about. But time passed, and with it that story remained as a strange anecdote that he hadn't shared with anyone other than his wife. Until something happened. 5 years later, in 2014, his brother, also a trucker, experienced something similar. He was driving at night on the route to Mazatlan. He wasn't driving at that moment. It was his turn to rest, but instead of sleeping, he decided to sit with the driver to keep him company and chat. Everything was going smoothly until the driver saw something ahead on the highway. "Hey, is that someone walking?" My uncle leaned toward the windshield and squinted. There was an elderly man, hunched over, disoriented, moving forward with slow steps toward them. The driver braked. They opened the door and my uncle spoke to him. "Sir, are you all right?" The man looked up with the same confused expression that my uncle had seen years before. "Who are you? Where are we?" My uncle told him to get in, that it wasn't time to be walking alone on the highway, that he'd give him a ride to the nearest town or if he wanted, even to Mazatlan. The man didn't respond immediately. He stayed quiet for a few seconds, as if he were thinking about something. Then he looked at them, pointed ahead toward where they were heading, and said, "Death is walking very close." And before they could react, he simply let himself fall backward, as if the weight had overcome his legs. My uncle got down immediately to help him, and as soon as he touched him, he felt a chill that ran through his whole body. The man was cold, almost as if he were already dead. But as soon as he touched him, the man got up and in a low voice said to him, "Let me continue on my way. I'm going after the little hill." My uncle let him go and got back on the bus without asking questions, and while it moved forward, he tried to see through the rearview mirror. The little old man was still there. The driver said, "Who knows where he's going? But there he goes." Just a few minutes passed when, turning around a curve, they encountered something that made them brake suddenly. A trailer stopped in the middle of the highway. Behind it, a car smashed to pieces with half of it stuck under the bottom of that box. They could barely brake. The place was very dangerous to be stopped in. They stopped in front of the trailer, and what he did was run with emergency lights, place them along the curve. The truck driver seemed to be in shock, with his hands on the steering wheel, and the worst thing was that when he passed by the side of that destroyed car under the box, without even a trace of whoever could have or those who could have been its occupants, my uncle felt the same cold as minutes before when he had helped the man get up. The cold of death. As I told you, community, the two brothers told their stories to the family for the first time at a wake. Years later, they looked at each other with incredulity when they described the man, when they completed each other's details before the other mentioned them. Without a doubt it was the same one. He dressed the same. And the strangest thing of all is that they say he looked too much like their grandfather, but they knew it wasn't him. Maybe another relative. Maybe someone who continues to take care of them on the road.
Hola, it's Rachel from Wait Que, your Spanglish podcast de confianza. When we started this podcast, I had no idea how much work went into it. Recording, editing, designing logos, managing socials. Each day brought a new challenge. Starting something from scratch is exciting, pero it can also be very overwhelming. That's why I wish I had something like Shopify back then. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and it's also perfect for anyone getting started. Build your online store with Shopify's professional templates, and let their AI tools help write descriptions, polish photos, and generate headlines. Shopify's got your back with inventory, shipping, returns, and all the not-so-glamorous parts of running a business. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your site. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/sonoro. Go to shopify.com/sonoro for more information.
Hello, Tales of the Night. My name is Mike, and I want to share my story. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't listen to the podcast because I don't usually consume scary things. But my girlfriend is the #1 fan, and that's how I'm sharing her experience. I'm not sure if it's paranormal. You all will decide that. But that it was terrifying. It simply was. I'm a photographer here in Los Angeles, but whenever I can, I go to Mexico to photograph those landscapes that aren't found anywhere else. My parents left me when I was a child, and going there to their country, to my country, makes me connect a lot with them, feel close. What I'm going to tell happened on one of those trips, when I wanted to drive through the entire Baja California peninsula by car, taking advantage to take photos whenever I could, of course. I drive very slowly, always looking for places, and I planned everything to drive only a few hours per day and always with sunlight. What I wanted most was to have time to stop, to explore. Anyone who has made that trip or who has had the opportunity to check the map will know that from San Quintín in Baja California Norte, the last municipality, it's 5 or 6 hours of desert to Guerrero Negro in Baja Sur. Desert. Literally desert. Although I had left very early, the desert landscapes were so beautiful that the afternoon started to fall on me. 6 hours of road were going to be short for me. I stopped a lot to take photos and had to continue. However, when I was already decided to push through to my next stop, I started to feel bad. Like something I had eaten the day before, which was all seafood. Near a place called Cataviña, I decided to stop. I saw what appeared to be a store, a place in the middle of nowhere, and I stopped. I was in the desert. I'm not lying when I say it was truly in the middle of nowhere. Kilometers and kilometers and kilometers from the nearest person. The heat was unbearable despite the fact that the afternoon was starting to fall. I realized that this place was abandoned. I was going to peek inside, but I recognized a snake's tail barely visible, coiled behind the door. Behind there was a pit toilet as abandoned as the store, but it would serve so I wouldn't have to relieve myself in the sun. I checked carefully that there were no snakes and went in, my stomach pain and the unbearable heat. But I heard something. Suddenly someone was approaching. They were the footsteps of two people. I heard how they walked around the abandoned store. Then I heard them approach a little toward where I was. He went in there, said two different voices. We'll wait for him out here. We're going to wait for him here, they said one after the other, as if complimenting each other, although they said the same thing. I had a moment of doubt. Maybe I had entered their property without permission. And there, in the middle of the desert, on this road far from any other house, from any other person, it didn't suit me to argue. I spoke to them from inside. I told them I had had an emergency, that I was only using the bathroom, that I would gladly pay something for using it when I came out. They didn't answer me. Hide. We're going to wait for him. We're going to hide and wait for him, they said among themselves once more, whispering. I looked around. There was nothing to defend myself with. I calculated the meters I was from my car. How many seconds would it take to run there? Would I manage to escape? Obviously, in that place there wasn't even the slightest cell phone signal. A few minutes passed. I was ready to go out, but I didn't dare until finally I gathered courage and did it. I opened the door suddenly and ran out without looking back. I reached my car. I opened it. I started it. The highway in front of me opened up to shoot out of there, but I had made it. But I didn't see anyone. I moved slowly in the car to look at that abandoned store from both sides. Nothing. Nobody. I returned to the point where I had initially left it without turning it off. I opened the door. It really seemed like I was alone. And now it didn't seem like a place where I should be scared. It was just a lonely place, nothing more. A few steps from the highway, it was starting to get dark. Now, more so. Yes, it seemed like a beautiful place to take a photo. I got out. I walked to the store, to the bathroom again. I know you won't believe me, but I noticed my footprints in the sand, in the dust. First the subtle ones from when I approached to investigate, then the footprints from when I ran back to the car. The strange thing was that I didn't find anything else. Not a single other footprint. Not a sign of those two people who were there and who I had clearly heard. My confusion was such that I went back to the bathroom, walked around the store, walked around looking in all directions, and the only thing there was desert, nothing more. The voices I heard weren't like part of a dream, nor diffuse. They weren't clear, very clear, and they had seen me. I had no choice but to continue on my way with much confusion. My friends say it's the heat, surely. That maybe it was a desert hallucination. Something that isn't so strange. My girlfriend believes they could have been the spirits of the people who inhabited that place, angry because I entered without permission. For my mom, everything is signs. She tells me that whatever made me stop there a few more seconds in that place was for a purpose. She says everything happens for a reason. I leave the last word to you all, and I know you aren't so much believers, but I promise you that being there, living it, truly it was a terrifying experience in broad daylight, but so alone, so far from everything, as if it had been in the middle of the night. My dad has worked behind the wheel his whole life, in taxis and cargo trucks and buses as a private driver. He has lived like that on the road and has been able to know the whole country that way. Today I want to tell you something that happened to me with him. On one of the first times I accompanied him, a long trip, when he did moves to other states in the company that a friend of his had, who unfortunately no longer exists. The job was very simple. Go to the base where the trucks were, then to the indicated address, where a group of loaders filled it with an entire move in less than an hour. And then he would start the journey to another city, to another state, sometimes very far, where he would arrive at an address and a group of local loaders would already be waiting to also, in a couple of hours, completely empty the truck. Sometimes the trip was used to load something to bring back, but that was rare. Almost always it was a simple job, round trip. It was his second job because he almost always spent his time driving his Uber all the hours he could. In fact, I think it was the first year of Uber in Mexico. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you. His life was behind the wheel. And well, for a long time, growing up, I imagined myself like that. I wasn't interested in studying because all I wanted was to drive like my dad, although he worked hard and worked so much so that I would have other possibilities. Do you understand me? Not at all did he say that working driving isn't dignified or doesn't end up being something well paid. Also, especially if you are, for example, a binational trucker. But my dad wanted me to also have other possibilities. Possibilities is the key word. And so driving would be by choice and not like him, who had to dedicate himself to that from before having the legal age to drive. Even so, he didn't dislike it when I told him since I was a child that I wanted to go to work with him, when all I asked for were little cars and steering wheels. That's why whenever possible he took me on short trips when it was possible. First within the city and later, as I said at the beginning of this story, I was able to accompany him outside. I was 14 years old when I accompanied him on one of his moving trips. We had to take a load near Guanajuato to an apartment in a very nice area. I don't remember exactly what it was called. A luxurious area far from downtown, a new building. The apartment must have been enormous for everything we were carrying in the truck to fit. Security was also quite strict, and they made us wait for, I don't know what authorizations, so they could start the move. Despite the fact that the loader guys had the key and were ready, in the end, we started so late that I even got down to help with the unloading, or we were going to end up returning until the next day. Spending the night there wasn't something we could afford, and that truck had no space to sleep, so we had to finish. We finally did it. Quite late. We made it and left to return home. Here begins the part of this story that leads me to write to you. But contrary to many I've heard, when there's a bad feeling, when a strange sensation seems to announce that something bad is going to happen, we were in a very good mood. My dad took me to dinner at a place he knew. That was still open. Some delicious tacos because I deserved them, he told me. The apartment owners gave me a good tip and we were in a very good mood. We would drive in the early morning like that, but my dad told me it was a good opportunity for me to see what the highways were like at those hours. We started the return trip. We finally got on the highway. I fell asleep for a couple of hours and woke up around 3. I had promised my dad I wanted to chat with him the whole time so he wouldn't get sleepy. I saw him tired when leaving. But then, when waking up, I saw him completely awake, concentrated on the road in a particular way. I asked him if everything was okay and he told me yes, to go to sleep. I told him no, that I could still stay awake, that I could still take it. We arrived at a completely deserted toll booth and stopped there. My dad ran to the bathroom. There was absolutely no one around. No cars were passing, and even so, my dad told me something that to this day seems completely strange to me. Not to get out for any reason, even if I saw him, even if he spoke to me, not to open the door for anyone. That seems strange to me. But after all, with me half asleep in the early morning, I don't know. It could make sense. And then, automatically, as soon as my dad entered the bathrooms, I turned to the front and saw that someone was walking toward us. A woman. She had a black sweater that was too big for her and a very long skirt. So long that I couldn't see her feet. But she walked as if she were dragging them one by one, as if she couldn't lift them. She made an exaggerated movement, tilting her head and body to the left as if she had just seen me, like I was a little dog or something, and she was about to throw a stick for me to fetch. And like that, with the same face, she smiled at me. She had only a few teeth. She slowly approached the truck and, smiling in front of it, made a sign with her face. Then I read her lips. Open. She seemed like a lady. Almost a little old lady already, but kind. Her eyes were very closed because of her smile. I didn't do anything. I just wanted to ignore her, so she wouldn't realize I was there. She walked to the driver's door. Because of the height of the truck, I stopped seeing her. She knocked twice. I heard how she tried to open it. Luckily, my dad had taken a key and left it locked. I moved to the driver's side and tried to see through the mirror, to peek out, but I didn't see anything. I felt like she had gotten under the truck. I returned to my seat, opened the window a little, hoping my dad would come out of the bathroom so I could shout to him that someone was there. And as soon as he came out, I did. Without making much of a scene, my dad walked, crouched down to check under the truck, then walked to his side and checked again. Nothing. He simply got in. She's gone, he told me without adding anything more, without asking me what I had seen there. His attitude surprised me because it was as if, like in all ghost stories, my dad had said, maybe my son saw a ghost, but I didn't give it importance. We moved forward. We advanced a good stretch. It was almost 3:45. My mom had just called us to see how we were doing. She couldn't sleep if she knew we were on the highway, especially because I was going. My dad answered her that everything was fine, without giving me time to tell her about the lady. He simply told her we would arrive in an hour and hung up. And here something happened that still gives me chills to tell it. I noticed that my dad started to slow down. He got closer to the steering wheel and started to look at the highway with attention, as if he were looking for something. He slowed down a lot until he practically stopped the truck completely. Before I could ask him what was happening, I saw something that came out from the side of the road and positioned itself in front of the truck in the middle of the lane. A child of about 2 or 3 years old who waved with his little hand when he saw us. "Help," I heard him say. "Here, help," he repeated. My dad didn't stop looking at the road. I was going to ask him if we were getting out, but mid-word he stopped me with his hand touching my shoulder. He made a sign for me to keep quiet. "Help," I heard again, but this time the voice was different. The child must have positioned himself about a meter from the truck in front of us, where we couldn't see him anymore. And my dad, slowly, as if guessing his location, turned carefully to pass him without hitting him. He only kept looking at the mirrors constantly to make sure no other vehicle was approaching, which hadn't happened in a long time. Like that, very slowly, we must have passed him. And as soon as I calculated, the box had completely passed the place where the child was. My dad started to accelerate. I leaned out. I leaned toward the back, and for a second, illuminated by the red light at the end of the box, I think I could see the child running behind us at an impossible speed. "Dad, it's a child. He needed help," I told him. My dad shook his head no. they were going to rob us, it was a trap?" I asked. He told me yes, but after a few seconds he said no, that it wasn't true, as if he had regretted lying to me. Then he said the following: "From 3 to 4, you don't open the door for anyone. You don't stop for anyone. Even if they're children. Even if it's a girl. An old man. No one. Even if they're in the middle of the highway. Someone you know. From 3 to 4 is the devil's hour, and everything is unleashed." The devil's hour stayed very engraved in me that night. Maybe it was a crazy woman who wanted to get on at the toll booth. Maybe somehow, what we saw was a child, a trap by highway robbers. But I don't know. I didn't dedicate myself to the wheel, but still because of my work, which I'm starting, and sometimes for pleasure, I've had to be on the highway a lot, although I already know what I should do, and what I can encounter. I always avoid driving between 3 and 4 in the early morning hours.